It's a mock draft Monday. We dive into a new mock draft from NFL.com as well as one submitted by one of our listeners. Then more speculation comes out regarding Rob Gronkowski's possible future. Let's go.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to the Locked On Bucs Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And we thank you for making us your first listen or view of the day. I am James Yarcho, joined by my co-host, co-GM, co-whatever you want to call him, my good buddy David Harrison. You can find his written work over at BucsGameDay.com, while I am still over at BucsNation.com. And make sure you're following along on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82.
Yeah, we thank you again for making us your first listen or your first view every single day. Today's episode brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And we're starting this mock draft Monday off, James, with a listener submitted or viewer, we're not actually sure, submitted mock draft contribution coming to us today from Daniel Beatty, who emailed it to our Gmail account. Daniel, we greatly appreciate your submission. Not going to go over every single thing. You did a lot of activity here. We're going to go over the first 2 days of this mock draft because let's be honest, that's where everybody really wants to talk. But Daniel's starting off with some fireworks. Round one, traded pick number 27 to the Kansas City Chiefs. In return, he gets pick 29 in the first round, and he gets pick 94. So the Buccaneers add 94 to 91. They're in the third round, and he gives up pick number 261 with the 29th overall pick, James. Devontae Wyatt, defensive tackle out of the University of Georgia, a favorite amongst media members, amongst fans, comes in. And Daniel writes that he replaces Ndamukong Suh either this year or next year, regardless whether he's unsigned or whether he retires. Moving into the second round, pick 60, Daniel takes Christian Harris, linebacker out of Alabama, basically making him the heir apparent to replace Lavonte David when he retires. Of course, Lavonte on the final year of his current contract. And then pick 91, the Buccaneers' organic pick in the third round, Leon O'Neal Jr., safety out of Texas A&M, to come in and help replace Jordan Whitehead. I think from Todd Bowles' comments, we pretty much know nobody is straight up replacing Jordan Whitehead. Jordan Whitehead's replacement is going to be done by a community of players. Leon O'Neal Jr. is going to be one of those players. And with that 94th pick, James, in the third round, he trades it. He trades the 94th pick to Miami for picks 125 and 158. And this is where a Miami 5th, a Chicago, there's just a whole lot of picks involved here. And actually, I'll throw this last pick out. 125 is Zion McCollum, cornerback out of Sam Houston State, that I was telling you pre-recording, because we are also in the midst of our own network-wide mock draft that we will be turning into a episode bonanza over a full week, our ultimate mock draft for the fourth year, correct, if I remember, that we're doing this. There's 1 year that I tried to black out because it never happened, and you guys definitely never heard the trade that we made that we should not have made. That's going on right now too. Zion McCollum very quickly becoming one of my favorite mid-round cornerbacks to potentially join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I like what he did at the beginning of the draft. I like trading back a couple I'm that third rounder, and then still getting a guy that, you and I would have taken there at 27 in Devontae Wyatt. I'm growing to like this kid more and more and more by the day. And we know kind of the running joke now over the course of the last 5-6 years has been anyone who starts to get continuously mocked to the Bucs by multiple people ends up being the pick. It's almost like everybody knows who the Bucs first round pick is going to be every single year, regardless of draft position. I'm not going to, and I apologize, I'm not going to really gush about the second or third round picks. Mm-hmm. I understand the selection of Christian Harris, and I guess it's hard to kind of judge it when I don't know who's still sitting there available.
Yeah.
But when you take a look at these first three picks, I'm not putting linebacker and safety real high on my list of priorities for the draft over, he went D-line in the first round. So I need wide receiver depth. I need secondary depth. I need offensive line depth. I need tight end depth. So those almost appear to me to be more like luxury picks, and the Bucs don't have the luxury to do it this year.
Yeah, I think, I agree with that to a certain extent. Like, I like the foresight to think, Levante David's not going to be around forever, things like that. And again, looking at the date on this mock draft, I do want to say Keanu Neal not on the roster when this mock draft was sent in. So that is important because that could possibly alter that Leon O'Neal pick. What I will tell you is in the second round, I don't even need to know who came off the board. Somebody's going to be available, whether it's Sky Moore, whether it's Wan'Dale Robinson, whether it's David Bell, whether it's Christian Watson, whether it's Calvin Austin III. Stop me if you need more options. There's going to be a wide receiver available in the second round that is going to help impact your team this year and into the future that I would probably take over a guy like Christian Harris. But again, that's just really kind of dependent. If you're Jason Light and you're not re-signing Levante David, maybe you do bring in his replacement this year to kind of soften that blow next year. So love the logic. Don't necessarily have to agree with all of them, but that's why we do these conversations, because we don't always agree on everything that we do in these mock drafts, like our ultimate mock draft coming up. So Daniel, by all means, feel free to tell us where we got it wrong. When that drops, it'll be dropping here very soon. Speaking of draft, though, we got another mock draft coming up here on Mock Draft Monday. Could the Buccaneers trade back so far in the first round, James? They don't even pick on day one. Well, Chad Reuter of NFL.com thinks so, and we're going to tell you why he's wrong. But first, we're going to talk about betonline.net, your number one source for all your sports betting needs and information. Find all your latest sports developments, odds, podcasts, and reviews for all your different leagues this season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. So head to the website today. Use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action at BetOnline, where the game starts. Segment 2 here at the Locked On Bucs Podcast. David Harrison and James Yarcho coming at you on YouTube or on Odyssey or wherever you download your favorite podcast. Also find us on Twitter at JYarcho_Bucs, at DHarrison82, at Locked On Bucs, and our written work at BucsNation.com and at BucsGameDay.com. Thanks again for making us your first listener, your first view. Make sure you're also following the Locked On NFL podcast, Locked On Experts, covering the big stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. And if you check out today's episode, I will be on there talking with Lauren Cox about the unfortunate passing of former Ohio State, Pittsburgh Steelers, Washington Commanders quarterback Dwayne Haskins. Unfortunate news that happened over the weekend. A young man who was definitely looking forward to getting his career on track and having opportunities for his family, his wife, his other family members, and his NFL career. James, a lot of kids out there getting ready to start their NFL careers, and we hope that all of them are able to be as successful as possible. The bottom line is we know that's not going to happen, but all these teams are going to be looking to make the best out of these picks. Chad Reuter of NFL.com dropping a 4-round mock draft. Number 1, Jacksonville Jaguars take Aiden Hutchinson, the edge rusher out of Michigan. Number 2, Detroit takes Malik Willis, the quarterback out of Liberty. That's becoming a more and more popular mock draft selection. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but we'll have to find out. Houston Texans at number 3 take Ike Ekwonu, the offensive tackle out of NC State. Number 4, this is where things get really interesting. Seattle trades up to number 4 to take Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral, who I can honestly say I've never seen be the second quarterback off the board, let alone top 5. And then at number 5, the New Orleans Saints trade up to take Kenny Pickett, the quote-unquote most pro-ready quarterback in this group. So, James, before we get down to number 27 real quick, let's talk about the top 5 there. What do you think about this quote-unquote one of the weakest quarterback classes that we've seen in recent memory? 3 of them now going in the top 5.
Teams do crazy things when they're desperate to find a quarterback. What I find interesting is that Chad Reuter thinks that the New Orleans Saints are desperate enough to do this, even though they just signed Jameis Winston to, well, it was a 2-year deal, correct? So maybe they don't believe in Jameis long-term. Maybe they're just hedging their bets and thinking, well, if Jameis doesn't work out, we have the most pro-ready quarterback, waiting in the wings. I love it for the simple fact that New Orleans wasted draft capital to move all the way up to the top 5 to take a player that is not going to help them this season. So Buccaneers fans should like that move. But I find it curious. But like I said, we know teams go crazy for quarterbacks because if you don't have one, you need one, and you're gonna start taking dart throws. It wouldn't surprise me if we ended up, maybe not these exact teams, but if we ended up seeing 3 quarterbacks taken in like the top 10, I'm not going to be shocked.
Yeah, I mean, it's the quarterback market. There was a time in this mock draft, scenario or draft analysis season that people said there might not be a quarterback taken in the top 15 this year. You know what I mean? But
Right.
I think we all kind of had it in the back of our minds somewhere that quarterbacks get overdrafted every single year. Baker Mayfield at number 1, Jared Goff and Carson Wentz at number 1 and 2. It happens every single season. I would be shocked to see 3 in the top 5, just because even though quarterbacks do get overdrafted, this class, that is woof. Like, that is one heck of an overdrafting. 2 in the top 5. I could see 1 in the top 5, especially a guy like Malik Willis going to a team that knows they're years away from really being competitive. I could see them taking a flyer on a guy like Malik Willis. The New Orleans Saints, but not only talking about trading up in this draft, because keep in mind, they don't have a lot of future draft capital either. So the draft capital they're going to have to give up to move up from 16 to 5, like, I can't imagine that's not both their first this year. So you already traded up to get the second number 1 this year. Now you're trading both those number 1. So essentially, by the time this whole thing is done, you're trading like 5 or 6 draft picks to get Kenny Pickett. He better be the next coming of Drew Brees. But enough about the New Orleans Saints. There's no graphic. I wish I could whoosh. Anyway, number 27.
What's going to be funny is 5 years from now, we're going to look back on this quarterback draft class and be like, how wrong were we? There are 6 Hall of Famers in this draft at the quarterback position. It's going to be the most wild turnaround ever.
If there are 6 Hall of Famers out of this draft class, I will eat my own shoe on this show.
You guys heard it. Mark it down.
Now, here's what you have to remember. I said I'll eat my own shoe. I'm going to go buy a shoe made of cake, and I will eat that cake on this episode.
No.
Pick number 27, James Yarcho. The Buccaneers trade number 27 to the New York Jets, and in exchange, they get pick number 35, 117, and a 5th rounder in this year's NFL draft. Again, it's a 4-round mock draft, so we don't know if that's pick 146 or 163, but they gain the 35th pick. They gain the 117th pick. The Jets get Nakobe Dean. James, why do you hate this trade?
I hate this trade for a lot of reasons. Number 1, I don't think the Bucs got enough to move out of 27 when you're only getting pick 35 and then what is that, a 3rd rounder and a 5th rounder? No, that's not enough to drop out of the 1st round. You're losing the 5th year option on whatever player you do take first, and I think that's huge. And number 2, just for the sake of argument, players that were still on the board when the Bucs moved out of this pick, you had Wyatt, you had Petrie, you had Booth, you had players that were instant plug and play players that will have immediate impacts on this team, and you moved out of it.
Right.
It's bad. It's a bad trade. It's a bad return. It's bad strategically for who you could have had. It's just bad.
Yeah, I mean, you also had George Pickens out of Georgia still on the board. Yeah. Jahan Dotson was still on the board. Sky Moore, who has gotten a little bit of back-end first-round talk, was still on the board. I mean, just there's a plethora of players that could have helped the Buccaneers potentially win a Super Bowl in 2022 to trade back. But they do a trade back in this mock draft, and it just gets a little bit worse, at least from where James and I sit on the Locked On Bucs podcast. Pick 35, James, the Buccaneers take Boye Mafe, edge rusher out of Minnesota, to, I guess, back up Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, maybe rotate with Joe Tryon-Shoyinka. I don't know. I guess but what it does mean is that JPP definitely not coming back. At pick 60, the Buccaneers take Dalvin Cook's brother, James Cook, running back out of Georgia, and the people rejoice. 3rd round, pick number 91, Cole Strange, offensive lineman out of Tennessee, Chattanooga, joins the offensive line. There's some good depth there. 4th round, Zion McCollum. We talked about him in the mock draft submitted by Dan. We're talking about him here. We talked about him before recording. Zion McCollum, cornerback out of Sam Houston, going to the Buccaneers at pick 117. And then at 133 to round out the 4-round mock draft, Thomas Booker, defensive tackle out of Stanford, who has 2 sacks in the last 18 games. So what do you think about the mock draft class from Dan Reuter at NFL.com?
Woof. That is
a solid C. It's a solid C.
That's being generous. So you get depth at a position of need with the 3rd round pick of Cole Strange. You could argue that the Buccaneers need a running back. You absolutely can make that argument. I've been pounding that table, even with the return of Fournette and the return of Gio. I still think they need another running back in that room because they have not theoretically replaced Ronald Jones yet.
Right.
But that is not as pressing of a need as corner or wide receiver, or I don't know. How about a defensive lineman like Devontae Wyatt, who is sitting there at 27? Instead, you go with a backup edge rusher with your first pick. You go with a number 3, maybe number 4 running back in the second round. I mean, all I know about Zion McCollum is what you've said. So he could be a steal in the 4th round. I don't know. But again, he's not an instant impact guy. Thomas Booker won't even make the initial 53-man roster. So all around, from the trade down to pick number 133, this is an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it either. I mean, and it's no offense to any of these players like Boye Mafe, you know what I mean? If Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is not on the roster, Boye Mafe, I think, is a great fit. Sure. James Cook, good player, you know what I mean? I just, given what they haven't addressed at this point in time, like if you can find a defensive lineman, like if you get Logan Hall at number 35, then okay, take James Cook at number 60. I'm still a little bit worried about the wide receiver position, but you can't address every single thing in the NFL draft. You know what I mean? You've got to leave a little bit to post-draft free agency. Zion, yeah, I like him, but I like him as a day 3 guy. You know what I mean? Like he's good, but he's a good day 3 prospect. He's competing with Ross Cockrell for snaps. That's about where he's going to be in his rookie season, unless he really comes on the scene, in which case, Jason Light's going to win Executive of the Year. But yeah, it's nothing against any of these players specifically, just what they represent for the Buccaneers doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Although, look, maybe these guys know something about the Buccaneers edge rusher situation than we do, because a lot more and more of these mock drafts are having the Buccaneers go edge in the first or early second rounds.
Don't like that. Don't like that at all. But hey, we'll express that in our ultimate mock draft, where you and I get to make the smart decision for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yes, and we'll be told by all wide and spread out across Bucs Nation that it's a perfect pick.
Oh, we're going to make so many people angry. Gronk is back in the news yet again, and we're going to let you know what happened in just a moment. But first, I have to ask you, have you tried Built Puffs? Yes. Because David will not stop telling me about how good
they're delicious
brownie batter puff bar is. And I can only imagine, because Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They are a treat, and they are covered in 100% real chocolate, from brownie batter to churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. What was the other one that you just got? You got like strawberry cheesecake?
Ooh, I got raspberry cheesecake. That's a Built bar. That's not a Built Puff. That's a Built bar, but it's delicious. And I'm not even a fan usually of like the fruit flavors, but the raspberry cheesecake is amazing.
I do love a good piece of raspberry cheesecake, but all of these bars, Puffs or the OGs, they're low calorie, high protein. You can replace your candy bars, and they are better for you. A typical candy bar, anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Built bars, 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, 17 grams of protein. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think a flavor might be good, they're going to make it. They're going to figure it out, and then they're going to reverse engineer, and they're going to make it good for you. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15. You're going to get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Wrapping things up here on a Monday edition of the Locked On Bucs Podcast. James Yarcho, David Harrison on Twitter at @JYarcho_Bucs, at DHarrison82. Find the show at Locked On Bucs. And David, I have to start off this segment with a special shout out to my guy, David Stackman. David reached out to me on Facebook. Turns out he also lives in Ohio, new to the show, just started watching and listening to us, said that he loves what we do here, what we talk about, and asked me what part of Ohio I lived in. I let him know. Yeah, it turns out he's like 10 minutes down 75 for me. So we start chit-chatting, and David, in all of his awesomeness, says, "Hey, I have a picture I want to send to you. Give me your address, and I'm going to send it over." And he sent me this awesome Super Bowl 55 champion. It's on what's the word I'm looking for?
Cardstock.
Canvas. It's a canvas print, framed Beautiful. David,
And it's
thank
heavy.
you so much. It is very heavy.
Yeah. So when the
Very
ninjas
heavy.
come calling, you have a weapon.
So, yeah, for those of you watching on YouTube and you saw the new picture in the backdrop, that is courtesy of awesome Buccaneers fan here in Ohio, David Stackman. So, David, thank you again.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Awesome first
David,
name as well, by the way.
yes, fantastic first name, which also gets confusing when I'm talking to that David and then I transition to say to you, David.
Never gets old hearing you praise the name David. It's just more the better.
I'm just saying that David sent me this awesome picture.
This David makes you money.
Whoa. I earn my money. We make it together.
Yeah.
Just saying. All right. But David Harrison, back in the news once again, is Rob Gronkowski, Gronk man himself, Mr. Spike, current free agent tight end who has not yet made a decision in any way, shape, or form as to whether or not he is going to return to football this season. But David, you had brought up some things off air regarding Rob Gronkowski and what is going on with him as of the latest.
Yeah, so most recently he was at the Nickelodeon Kids' Choice Awards, I believe, co-hosting with a person.
Miranda Cosgrove.
There you go. That's her name.
Hosting with Miranda Cosgrove from iCarly.
Yes.
And School of Rock. Took me a while to realize that she was one of the students in Jack Black's School of Rock. Great movie.
I already knew that. I don't know how you didn't know that. So that's where Gronk was most recently, and took the time out to speak to people at People and also people at SB Nation, and told them both basically the same thing: is that he hasn't made his decision. He doesn't know if he's coming back or not. He loves the Bucs. He loves his teammates. He loves the organization. And if he comes back, it will be for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So if you're a member of Bucs Nation, what does that mean for you? It means that if Gronk's not playing for you, he's not playing for anybody. So there's a little bit of a silver lining there. He did also say, James, and this is probably the most concerning part. I mean, we kind of already knew all that. We already assumed, right? Especially we talked about it. When the Buffalo Bills signed O.J. Howard, the Cincinnati Bengals went out and signed somebody else. I can't remember exactly who anymore. But basically those were both the competitors for Rob Gronkowski's services that we had perceived out there in the open market. So as soon as those guys moved on, basically it was a sign that Rob had told them, I'm not going to come play for you. Whether I'm going to play at all, either way, I'm not going to play for you. So basically Rob validating that or verifying that information. So that's good news to a certain extent, right? The bad news in some of the conversations, I believe this is specifically from the one with People, is that he has said there is no timeline. He was asked specifically about draft weekend, and Rob Gronkowski said there is no timeline. Doesn't mean he won't make his decision and tell the Buccaneers what that decision is before draft weekend, James. But the prospect that he may not make that decision before draft weekend, how does that sit with you?
Not great. In fact, it was something that I had talked about, I think, on my solo episode. I can't remember. All the days start to run together after a while.
Yeah.
The Buccaneers need a plan for life with Gronk or life without Gronk.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure they have plans for both, but you can't execute your plan for life without Gronk and then turn around and find yourself in life with Gronk.
Right.
So it's going to affect the draft strategy. Now, we've laid out plenty of positional needs that they can and should address before tight end. Tight end certainly up there, but I think in order of importance, order of immediate impact, there are other positions that they can look to first.
Mm-hmm.
They find a tight end on day 3 that can come in, start to learn, be a little bit of a rotational guy. Great. Awesome. Fantastic. Wonderful. Outstanding. There are enough pass catching tight ends out there on the open market. None of them are Gronk. None of them are going to be Gronk.
Yeah.
But I think Blake Jarwin has plenty of untapped potential given the fact that he's dealt with some injuries. But then again, he's dealt with some injuries, so you're not really sure how well he can hold up. There are some other guys out there. You got Kyle Rudolph, who's kind of in the twilight years. He might be chasing a ring, but the guy still has hands, can still move the chains on 3rd and 6 if you need him to. So if you get through the draft process and you don't have an immediate plug and play guy, which you probably won't, they can still address the tight end position, and they still have Cameron Brate. Cameron Brate was the tight end 1 for this team for a couple of years and did a just fine job. Thank you very much. So you can always go back to Cameron Brate being the guy, but this decision affects more than just Gronk. This affects the entire team and the team's approach to the NFL draft.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm going to stop short of calling Rob Gronkowski selfish because I don't believe he's being selfish. I think he's earned the right to make this kind of decision and take his time making the decision. That's the perk of being a future Hall of Famer, guys. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. But I think if you're Jason Light and this Buccaneers staff, you basically have to enter this thing saying, we don't have Gronk till we do. So if you go into draft weekend with no Gronk, you approach the draft like Gronk is not going to be there. And if he is there, well, gravy on top, kudos to the team. And that's great. But I think that no matter what, you basically have to go into there. And the way I look at it, James, is day 2 and 3, you have to get a pass catcher in both. You have to get a pass receiving running back, a tight end that is capable of catching the ball, and a wide receiver or a wide receiver. 2 of those 3 have to happen day 2 and day 3, one on each. Round 1, you take the best player available at a position where they can potentially impact your team. Devontae Wyatt is obviously the player I think that most of us covet, maybe not Zion Johnson, a close second. So that's kind of the bad side. We're going to end this on good news, right? So good news sandwich. Good news is Gronk's playing for the Bucs or nobody. Bad news is he may not even make his decision until after draft weekend. Good news is Camille Kostek, I don't know if I pronounced it right, Rob Gronkowski's girlfriend wants him to play. And that's according to Gronk. He was asked about it. And he said that he believes she wants him to play again. She supports him greatly. She wants to see him in action. She knows he loves it. She wants to see him doing well, doing good things out there. Plus, he also said she loves the other wives and the other girlfriends in the organization. She loves the atmosphere around the team and the organization. She just genuinely enjoys the whole process. So you have Gronk out here spitting mad love about his teammates, Tom Brady, the coaches, the organization, and now his girlfriend also does. And James, I know they're not married, but you know the saying goes, happy wife, happy life. Well, happy girlfriend, happy life friend. I don't know, happy-ish, right? I think it matters a little bit that Camilla wants him to play.
It very well could play into his decision because I've been speculating maybe Gronk wants to step away because he wants to spend more time with Camilla and supporting her endeavors and supporting her career and getting to travel with her and things like that. If she's sitting there saying, no, babe, I want you to play. I want to go hang out with Mariah and Giselle and the other girls and we have a blast and I love hanging out with them and I know you love football. Let's do it again. You know, my travels, my career, it's all still going to be there. Don't worry about it. I want to see you play. That's going to weigh heavily into Rob Gronkowski's decision, just like any decision that we make as people that are in relationships. You weigh in the opinions of your wife or your girlfriend or your spouse or whoever it is, because, you know, happy spouse, happy house. And
that's a better one. I should have said that.
Yeah. So you take that into consideration 100% because you're not going to be selfish about the decision that you make. You're not going to do something that they don't want you to do, and you're not going to avoid doing something that they want you to do. You got to, all the information has to come, together, and you have to sort through all of it, the pros and cons, everything. So it's encouraging that Camilla's on our side and want to see number 87 back at Raymond James spiking footballs into the ground in the end zone. Hopefully they don't bounce into the crowd and then they got to get him back because Tom Brady broke yet another milestone because he breaks them on a weekly basis.
Absolutely.
So, all right, David, with that, we are going to get out of here. We will be back tomorrow with more Buccaneer stuff to talk about. If there's anything that you would like us to talk about, whether it's draft related, free agency related, anything at all, you can shoot us an email to lockedonbucspodcast@gmail.com or give us a call at 813-444-5841. We look forward to all of those calls, all of those messages, all of those topics. And we want to thank all of you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view of the day. Now you need to make your second listen at the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It is also free and available on all platforms. For David Harrison, I am James Yarcho, and until we speak again, make sure you are checking out everything going on over at BucsGameDay.com, BucsNation.com. Follow along on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, be good to one another, fire those cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here at Locked On Bucs.